Good morning. Here we are going to learn the poem Africa written by David Diop. David Diop, his full name is David Mandasi Diop. He is born in the year 1927 on July 9th, and he was a French West African poet. He is known for his contribution to negative literary movement. His works reflect its anti-colonial stance. His one of the famous collection of poetry is Coups de Pilan, came out from the Presence Africaine in 1956. It was posthumously published in English as Hammer Blows and translated and edited by Simon Mondo and Frank Jones, who is considered as African writers, and in the written in African Writers series in the year 1975. When we come to the poem Africa, the poem has 23 lines, and when we come to know about the first 4 lines, Africa, my Africa, Africa of proud warriors in ancestral savannas, Africa of whom my grandmother sings. Here, David Diop displays his own country, Africa, and about the proud warriors who was there in the fighting because of the resistance of invention of armed colonists, and Africa ancestral savannas, Africa of whom my grandmother sings. He was always hearing the story from his own grandmother about Africa and their golden historical moment, that the resistance of the invasion of armed colonists. And then when we come to the other lines, on the banks of the distant river I have never known you, but your blood flows in my veins, your beautiful black blood that irrigates the fields, the blood of your sweat, the sweat of your work, the work of your slavery. David Diop was born and raised in nation of banks of the river, and despite he was not growing up there in Africa, but there he is in France, and he never visited Africa. And also the speaker is aware that he was an African blood. The blood coursing through his body is Africa, and also the blood that David Diop uses to represent his genuine African identity. He wants to be an African, have to follow an African identity also. Africa, Diop refers to Africa as a person here, speaking of all the colonized African who was irrigating in the fields of Africa, and the tribes and their culture of the culture that have been continuing. He's been there become a person and attributing the quality of person on Africa. And the slave, there we can see a slave, the works of the sweat of your work, labor, the work of your slavery, it was all in the Africa. And when we know to come to the line Africa, tell me Africa, is this your back that is unbent? Africa, unbent, this back that never breaks under the weight of humiliation, this back trembling with red scars and saying no to the whip under the midday sun. Though we can see a sarcastic question to his motherland, actually left her back unbent. The poet implies the slaves in this sentence and bearing a load of humiliation for the rest of their lives on their backs. and saying that they have red scars. They have red scars on on the back, and it is unbent. They were tortured. The people in African, or the African people were tortured, and their back is still unbent. They were tortured and suffered because of the cruel colonists, and they were always tortured by those cruel colonists, and their back is unbent there. Then the next line, but a grave voice answers me, impetuous child, that tree, young and strong, that tree over there, splendidly alone amidst white and faded flowers. That is your Africa, springing up anew, springing up patiently, obstinately, whose fruit bit by bit acquires the bitter taste of liberty. The poem ends, the bitter taste of liberty. Here, the voice, the grandmother describes Africa as a tree which is young and strong. The tree is young and strong, and there is among white and faded flowers are on the tree. The white and faded flowers depicts the invaders' civilization. This is and in an optimistic view that once the Africa become know about the feeling of nationality, and it signifies the trees fruit signifies African, who is gradually will become develop a feeling of nationality and a black pride and liberty. The moment comes, they will stand up to claim and know what is rightfully theirs. Actually, the poem here, David Diop's poetry, Africa, is a kind of a form. It's a form to protest against the repressive French colonial power, and he was sympathetic to all of his fellow men and women striving for freedom and backed the African revolutionary movements. In this poem, he addresses his feelings on Africans' freedom and liberty. When we come to know about the major themes in Africa, freedom versus slavery can be seen, the patriotism, the dark side of human nature are the major themes of this poem. The poem exhibits the writer's love for his dear country, Africa, and he calls once this place had an average life span which is colonizers corroded. With their arrival in the state, Africa lost its originality, and Africa were treated like animals. Their land was taken, and their lives has taken by the colonized people. Although he has not witnessed these cruelties, the problem that the ancestors endured haunt him also. He realizes that he can't change the past, but he is hopeful for the future. He is optimistic that one day Africa will taste the fruit of liberty. I hope that you can understand me, and if you have any doubt regarding this poem, you can ask me. Thank you. Have a nice day.